Mr. Patapower, is there anything to report out of closed session?
Nothing to report out of closed session.
Okay, thank you. And would everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, let the record reflect that all board members are in attendance this evening. Mr. Sellers, would you please welcome the public?
Welcome to the monthly meeting of the Board of Education. Item C is placed on our agenda to enable members of our community to bring items that are not placed anywhere else on the agenda to the board's attention. If you would like to address the board on any agenda item, please complete a speaker's slip. All requests to speak must be submitted to the executive assistant to the board before the agenda item comes up. If you are requesting an agenda item be pulled for public discussion from Section E, the consent calendar, a speaker slip must be submitted to the executive assistant now, as approval of the consent calendar is one of the first items up for approval. The board is responsible for setting policy and direction for the students of Poway Unified School District. It is important to the community that civility and good role modeling be a very real part of our meetings. Students are always present at board meetings, and our meetings are live streamed via the internet, and recorded copies are posted on the PUSD website. Speaking is limited to 3 minutes per speaker, with a maximum of 15 minutes per side of each topic unless waived by the board president. There will be a 30-second warning when time is running out. Speakers may only speak on one topic under item C and may not defer their speaking time to another individual. Vulgarity and profanity will not be allowed. If you have a complaint or charge against a specific PUSD employee, it is recommended that you submit a formal complaint as outlined in our board procedure 4.106.2. The final step in this process provides the board the ability to hear an appeal of the complaint if the board so chooses. If you are voicing a complaint against an employee, in order to protect that employee's right to adequate notice before hearing of such complaint and to preserve the ability of the board to legally consider the complaint in any subsequent evaluation of the employee, it is the policy of the board to hear the complaint in closed session. If you have any written materials for the board to review that would provide more specific information, please submit them to the executive assistant. The Brown Act does not permit board action or extended discussion of any item not on the agenda, but your concerns will be referred to staff. With that said, welcome, and thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you. And now we will move on to approval of the minutes with the recommendation that the minutes of the May 18th regular board meeting, May 14th special board meeting, and the June 15th special board meeting be approved as presented. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, with a motion by board member Zane, seconded by Mr. Patapow. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, and the motion passes unanimously. Okay, and now we move to the approval of the agenda sequence. And there are no items to be considered prior to the routine agenda items. Is there a motion to approve the agenda sequence?
Motion to approve.
Okay.
Second.
All right, motion by board member Zane, second by Ms. O'Connor-Radcliffe. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion passes unanimously. Now we move to the approval of the consent calendar. Mr. Zane, do you have anything to pull from the consent calendar?
No.
Mr. Sellers?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Patapow?
No.
Ms. O'Connor-Radcliffe?
No.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to be the only one here. I'm going to pull, all right, I will try to make these brief. I'm going to pull E304. E311. And I just had a question about with Mr. Patapau's appointment. In order
Yes.
for him to declare that appointment, should we pull E601?
I think what might be better is, we could do this two ways. Mr. Patapau, if you know who you want to appoint, and you've already had that discussion with the individual, okay. Why don't you tell us the name now before we approve the consent calendar, and then it'll be approved as part of the consent calendar? Because it's agendized there.
I'm appointing Adalia Lovato. Give you some background. She's had a career, daughter school career in Poway. She has a daughter in Poway High. She has expertise in areas tech savvy, an educator as a school administrator who has had training and experience with technology integration in the classroom site to meet the California Common Core state standards. She'd like to volunteer her time so that the next generation of students has increased access needed to be a digital citizen and college career ready for the 21st century. For her specialized education and knowledge, she has 11 years of classroom experience, 14 years of educational administrative experience as an elementary principal. So she's done this before. It's nothing new with technology integration at the school level site, and had many discussions with parents, and she's instigated, or is not instigated, but implemented site plans for digital citizenship, bring your own devices. She's worked with elementary teachers to create a 3-year technology adoption plan to meet the requirements. She's also had taken a course by AXA for the leadership of technology integration for school administrators. So she comes she has very good background and expertise to be of value to this committee. So I'd like to appoint Adalia Lovato.
So for the audience, Mr. Patapau's appointment to the Technology Committee had to resign because he's moving out of town, and each board member was allowed to appoint one community member. So Mr. Patapau has selected, and with that, we'll follow up in the office, and I believe Wendy, the executive assistant, has already left a message for her, but we haven't contacted her. So we'll follow through on that, and so now we can just leave that on the consent calendar.
Okay, with the consent calendar having pulled items E304, E311, E601 having been discussed, is there a motion to approve the amended consent calendar?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Sellers, second by Mr. Patapau. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, and the motion passes unanimously. Okay, Dr. Collins, would you give your report, please?
Well, since we met just a week ago, I don't have a whole lot to report other than school's out, and as it was last week, actually. But there is a recognition piece in your agenda I'd like to bring your attention to on student scholarships, and it lists all of our high schools. Mount Carmel, Rancho Bernardo, Abraxas, Westview, all of those, Poway High School, Del Norte. Collectively, our seniors class that graduated just this month had been offered over $67 million, almost $68 million in scholarships. Now, some of those were joint offers. Some of those students received offers from various people, so the accepted amount out of all of that was $24,769,000. So congratulations to our seniors on their scholarship, and that's all I have for tonight.
Thank you. Okay, and now on to board member reports. Mr. Zane.
Thank you, Ms. Beatty. Just briefly wanted to express some appreciation for a number of events we've several of us have had an opportunity to attend since the last regularly scheduled board meeting. Personally, I enjoyed attending the Palomar Council PTA annual awards meeting and breakfast that was in late May. Believe it or not, that was our last regularly scheduled board meeting. I think it was May 18th, if I'm not mistaken, thereabouts. Also attended at the request of the faculty at Los Pal Elementary School, their career day, which was a great time. Had a blast there. The PUSD Foundation reception, where we got to see the projects that a number of students are working on. Board members Beatty and Michelle O'Connor-Ratcliffe were there. And it was a real pleasure attending the Bernardo Heights Middle School 8th grade advancement ceremony. Learned there, it's not called graduation at 8th grade, it's advancement, but then promotion. And attended the Westview High School graduation ceremony. That was a fantastic time as well. And then lastly, most recently, of course, was the Team PUSD end-of-year barbecue right here at the district office. Hamburgers a little bit overdone, but it was a great event. It was fantastic. So that's it. Thank you.
Mr. Sellers.
I will try not to duplicate anything TJ just said. Some of those were functions, like barbecue, for example, that sort of thing. I went to this before the last board meeting, but because of circumstances was not able to talk about it. I did attend the CSBA delegate convention in Sacramento, and I found it to be a very worthwhile body. I think they do a lot of work on our behalf, and I think that they work very hard to keep our interests first and foremost. I am basically replacing a living legend in Penny Ranftel. I have very large shoes to fill, but it's an extremely good team up there of experienced delegates in our region, and I'm very hopeful that they can show me the ropes quickly rather than slowly. The other is I did attend the closing ceremony for the Red, White, and Blue run at Rancho Bernardo High, which was fantastic, as well as shaming to see all those people running all those laps. In fact, our board president ran, what did you run, 15 miles, lady, or something like that? Okay, so, I mean, just, incredible amount of people committing incredible amount of time to doing something very worthwhile. I attended the closing ceremonies, and it was very, very interesting. And there aren't any student representatives here, but I wanted to say that I was a little embarrassed that there were no Mount Carmel people there. We've got all these Mount Carmel kids up on this board, and Mount Carmel didn't field a team. So I'm definitely going to try to make that different next year. I'm definitely going to try to see if Mount Carmel can field a team. The third thing is that, like all the other board members, I presided over some graduations. I was at the Twin Peaks Middle School promotion, which was a fabulous experience, really just wonderful. And then I went to the Poway High graduation later that night, and it was probably the best day I've spent on this school board, honestly, because, people would ask me why, and I'd say because I was surrounded by thousands of genuinely happy people who were happy with their educational experience, people who were proud of their children. They were taking photographs, they were hugging, they didn't know who I was, and they were, unless I stepped in their picture, they didn't care. It was just genuinely fabulous to spend that entire day surrounded by all that joy and all those families. It was really, really wonderful. So I look forward to doing it again.
Thank you. Mr. Patapel?
I got to start out by saying, Charlie, I didn't know you were that sensitive. Congratulations. And I'm glad you enjoyed yourself, because been doing it for a long time, and I was at Del Norte and Meadowbrook promotion and Abraxas graduation with Miss Beatty. The one thing I noticed, and over the years, I can remember my first graduation 19 years ago, and you never saw so many balls and balloons and what have you floating over the kids. This time, I don't think there was none of that. It was total respect and appreciation for what they were going through, and it bodes well for the principals and the staff, that they talk to the kids and they say, hey, this is one of the best moments in your life, appreciate it, and go from there. And I always, at the middle school, I try to address the parents, and one thing I asked the graduating classes, I said, the first thing I want you to do since you were promoted 8th grade. Now that you know everything, I says, I want you to go up to your parents, and I said, and give them a big hug and thank them. And tell them that you're going to regularly talk to them, because at high school, you're going to run into some problems, and you've got a natural resource right there in your parents. Believe me, they know a little bit more than you do, and I'd appreciate it. Just do me a favor and try talking to them. You'll find out it's a very pleasant experience. The other thing, I had the district barbecue. I didn't have any hamburger. I had the chicken. It was very good.
Ms. O'Connor Radcliffe.
So super busy end of the year last month here. Just at my kids' school alone, during the final 2 weeks of class, I attended multiple student presentations and plays, a volunteer tea, several retirement tributes, 2 class picnics, a yearbook party, the school awards ceremony. I chaperoned the 2nd grade field trip and helped set up the 5th grade promotion party. It was awesome out at Adobe Bluffs. I also had a chance to tour Poway High's brand new engineering academy. I believe next year is the first year of it. Very impressive robotics club at work there too. Big thank you to teacher Roger Dome for that invitation. That was really interesting. That PTA awards breakfast, I just want to mention, the PTA presented our district with one of those big symbolic checks for $7.5 million, and that's the estimated value of over 280,000 volunteer hours contributed to our school by all these PTA members. We know that we couldn't do it without our volunteers, but to put a number on it like that is so eye-opening. So really, thank you is not enough, and that was amazing. I got to do the introduction to instruments. This is put on by the Poway Center for Performing Arts Foundation. It's one of 6 assemblies that occur around the district. It's intended to inspire 4th grade students to take up an instrument for 5th grade band the following year. I went to the one at Westview High School with 3 of our elementary schools there. It was really, really incredibly done, and the kids were so excited. They were jumping out of their seats, hands flying in the air. Who wants to play the trombone? Everyone in the room. Who wants to play the flute? Everybody. It was really awesome. What a great program. The PUSD Foundation reception, again, I was there with many of us up here, but talking to the kids, the students who were the beneficiaries of all of those STEM opportunities, those foundation grants, those activities wouldn't have been possible without the foundation. So it was great to see what kind of work our foundation is doing and what those kids are getting from it. The Abraxas Garden ribbon cutting, you didn't mention it. A lot of us were at that too, but that promises to be a great interdisciplinary effort, initially featuring our construction technology program students and moving on to include an accessible garden. I was so impressed by the plans and really the commitment of the larger community, the city of Poway, various members of the Chamber of Commerce out in Poway. Such an impressive deal, and most of all by the students' own excitement for what's going to be happening there, those possibilities. It's really ambitious. They're still looking for donors, so if you know anybody interested, sponsor, get in there. SWAC, you didn't mention SWAC either. That was a good one. We just approved on our consent calendar as item E107, something that I first heard about there. We just received $1 million grant, just under $1 million, for 3 years on tobacco use prevention education. That is a big deal. We haven't had it in several years, and it's a big deal again. Way to go, PUSD. I sat on a judging panel for Poway High's Senior Project Day. Wow, that's really interesting too. Attended Black Mountain's 8th grade graduation ceremony and assembly at Sunset Hills Elementary for the end of the year. And I nursed my sore hand for at least 24 hours after shaking over 1,000 students' hands at Mesa Verde's 8th grade promotion and RB High's graduation. So that was fantastic. Way to round out the school year. Today was the first day of ESY extended school year, and my son was on the bus. So, woohoo! That's it for me.
All right. So I'll try not to duplicate, but Mr. Sellers, since you and I are both Mount Carmel families, I do, in defense of Mount Carmel, it was their CIF invitational weekend. So,
And they did win.
okay. Thank you for that. And that's with regard to the Team Red, White, and Blue. I had the honor of speaking at the opening ceremonies for Team Red, White, and Blue. Chris Kennedy had come here and spoken about this this organization and the project that he and his wife Kathleen and others had taken on. And just so you all know, the mission is encapsulated in the philosophy that it is to enrich the lives of America's veterans by connecting them to their community through physical and social activity. And so it's basically a 12-hour relay of running laps. And I saw some kids I knew from Black Mountain Middle School, other middle schools and high schools and clubs in our district who were running laps, running their hearts out. And yes, I ran 60, Mr. Sellers. I also attended the Palomar Council breakfast. Excellent. Always look forward to those eggs Benedict, and the foundation reception, as mentioned, with all the student projects and clubs out on display, as well as the Abraxas ribbon cutting ceremony. I also got to participate in the Black Mountain Academy's Career Day. My last of 4 children has gone through just graduated, promoted from Black Mountain, and the Academy does a Career Day, so I did the career of school board trustee. I'm hearing groans. And I attended our first advisory committee, their second meeting for the education technology. I attended that meeting, and I also participated in the promotion at Black Mountain. As I said, I got to hug my kid on stage and hand out the certificates, and also participate in Mount Carmel's high school graduation, where I got to hug and give the diploma to my graduating senior, as well as many of her friends whom I know. Also took the family to the Rancho Bernardo High School's hosting of the heart screening, Screen a Teen for undiagnosed heart conditions, very worthwhile endeavor. Dave LeMaster was there walking around, the principal at Rancho Bernardo. Thank you to Rancho Bernardo for hosting that, and for the Save a Life Foundation for putting that on as well. Terrific group of people. I was also an honored guest at the Confucius Institute event, in which they spoke about their Mandarin immersion programs that they hope to one day have here in our school district, and that was very interesting. And along with Board Member Patapow and Associate Superintendent Mel Robertson, I attended Braxis graduation, which is always very special. That's just a big familial environment there. And I also observed 3 different, our bargaining units are in negotiations right now, and I had the opportunity to observe 3 of those negotiations. And that is it for my report. So with that, we will move on to public comments. Mr. Patapow, do we have any speakers?
We have 2 agendized speakers. Our first speaker is Keith Wilson.
Good evening. This is my first board meeting, so do I announce my name and address? That's what I was told. It's Keith Wilson. My address is 16871 St. James Drive, Poway, California. And when I listened to the rules Mr. Sellers gave, I realized that I couldn't go forward with the exact comments I had prepared, so I have to modify it here a little bit. But I just want to let you know that I'm an old-timer here in the district. My wife and I got married in 1970 and lived in the Poway School District, and some of the nicest people and the best moments in my life have been somehow associated with the Poway school system. Whether it's been students, coaches, teachers, or whatever, it's been a big part of my life. And I'm very proud of the district. But there are some things that are wrong, and I think the board has to correct them. And I'll address Michelle O'Connor Ratcliffe. I didn't vote for you because of your campaign promises at all. I voted for you because of your parents. I've known them a long time, and if you have any of their DNA and a backbone, you could be an important member of this board. And Mr. Zane, I read your resume, and you seem to be strong on family values. And that's part of my concern tonight, and I hope that that will play a role in the concerns I have. And so I'm not going to read anything, but I'm going to pass out what I intended to read for you board members to take a look at either after the meeting or whenever. But it's a big concern to me, and it does concern Mr. Collins. And I like John Collins, but I think he's made some mistakes that are the type that cannot be forgiven or forgotten. And that's what I want the board members to look at tonight. And I want to thank you for your service to the community. It's very important. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Kim Garnier.
That was my dad, and I'm so proud of him. My name is Kim Garnier. My address is 17124 Grape Arbor Court, Poway 92064. PUSD is committing discriminatory practices. PUSD is denying students in lower socioeconomic areas. PUSD is denying equal opportunities for education, and PUSD and the principal at Painted Rock are discriminating against parents and families they don't like. What happened to Scott Rings or the two moms who came to the board asking for help? Scott Rings went years without anyone from PUSD helping him. Thankfully, President Beatty, after hearing his story, stepped up and helped him. Mr. Rings is disabled and needed help, and the cabinet denied him. The two moms asked for help to protect children who were bullied, and they were denied help too. The protocol of this district is to get rid of the problem, abort those who don't toe the line, deny, deny, deny until the problem goes away. The principal at Painted Rock Elementary, Mary Jo Thomas, ignored my family. She would not look at us or say hello. When my husband Chris and I asked to meet with her to resolve whatever it was she didn't like with us, she refused. We asked to meet with her multiple times, and she did not meet with us once, not one time. Is this how she treats all families or just my family? When we begged John Collins to intervene to help us, he arranged a meeting. We asked for sensitivity training for the principal or some sort of resolution to help us work with our children's principal. Ms. Thomas left that meeting early, and as is typical for someone who speaks out of both sides of his mouth, John Collins threw his employee under the bus. John Collins explained where
Please, Kim, please refrain from using names.
Okay, yes, sir.
Thank you.
Our superintendent explained where he believed the principal falls on the racism spectrum. He said the first thing he thought when he heard how she conducted the student site council election was, and I quote, lawsuit. Chris and I believed we were making progress towards a resolution. The superintendent was our principal growing up, and Chris in particular looked up to him. Chris had many lunch meetings with him, and they spoke frequently. We trusted he would help our family. He hugged us goodbye that day and told Chris he couldn't wait to have him back teaching at Poway Unified as soon as everything was resolved. The next day, the superintendent issued an order to keep my husband away from our children's school. What kind of abuse of power is that to take away the rights of a parent? What will that cost the district later on in damages? In court, the principal, under oath, admitted she was not afraid of my husband just days before the district filed paperwork stating she was in such danger they had to take legal action. The superintendent hired 24-hour security to make people believe there was something to fear. The principal told parents threats were made, and no threats were made. There's a serious problem with the superintendent and the principal, and you're taking the same path you have before. Deny, deny, deny. What will it cost PUSD to protect the bad apples while punishing good parents? I'm asking the cabinet to remove the principal, and since I don't believe you will, and for a long list of other reasons, I'm asking the board to replace the superintendent with the superintendent we can trust. Thank you.
Steve Dow.
Hi again. Thank you for your time. Steve Dow, 12406 Pomerado Place, San Diego. 92128. Last month, the board voted 3-2 to table resolution 68-2015 entitled Supporting Educational Opportunities for the Humane Treatment of Animals. It was decided this way because it was decided that it did not fall under the subject jurisdiction of the board. I'd like to talk about what I recommend, which is that I'm planning on drafting a new board item that would go further and actually, if passed, would indefinitely suspend all trips to SeaWorld. This definitely would fall under the governing board jurisdiction. As a reminder, students are taken from their class to go to SeaWorld, which is a for-profit company, and the parents are asked to pay for this to occur. So I understand SeaWorld has given free passes to many district staff, so I do know that this is probably not a popular thing for me to be saying, but it's in line with my conviction as a parent and a community member. It's funny, you had mentioned tobacco use prevention. I remember watching recently a documentary on the Kennedys, and I remember seeing video of congressmen smoking at their posts during session. Could not believe that smoking was so ubiquitous as to be permitted in the Capitol building. Decades later, we as a society have changed our collective feelings on smoking, but only after becoming more educated about the harm that smoking does and also having the courage to expose some of the machinery under the tobacco industry hood. I see a clear parallel here with the discussion regarding SeaWorld. Science tells us that these animals, dolphins and orcas, are highly intelligent, emotional, and self-aware. We know that they have evolved to swim and communicate over vast distances in the wild. To me and many scientists, keeping these animals therefore in these tanks is clearly animal cruelty. Maybe several years ago we could collectively claim ignorance, but now we have too much information. Now we know better. I understand the convenience that SeaWorld provides to this school district, and I don't doubt that students are capable of learning there, as any experience can be a learning experience, but I'm also keenly aware of what we are teaching them by taking them there. We are essentially teaching them that animal cruelty, in this form at least, is acceptable societal behavior, so much so that we ask for the finances in support of this for-profit company. This is the case despite a goal of Poway's mission statement being to develop in all students an understanding of and commitment to moral precepts and ethical behavior. And I see the support of SeaWorld as
Please summarize your comments.
Yes, I see support of SeaWorld as an obvious conflict with this goal, mission statement goal. Lastly, the SeaWorld trainer came to speak last week, and he vehemently attacked several of the credentials of animal caretakers and scientists in the Blackfish movie. This goes so far as to call it social terrorism, what they were speaking of. Yet I just wanted to point out that his credentials and the fact that he's bankrolled by SeaWorld was not brought up.
Thank you. That's it. Wayne Rosenthal.
Kind of hard to reach this thing. My name is Wayne Rounceville. I live on Poway Road. I live in Poway, and what I'm going to say tonight is kind of a call for the public, the teachers, the board, and the administration, if they'll pay attention and do something about this. My topic is finance, PUSD finances. I would like to see a public report or sources where we can find out what the PUSD credit rating is, what the debts outstanding are, what the 5-year budget, this year and last year's budget versus actuals are, loans under consideration, no bid recent awards, and no bid contracts that are being contemplated. I would like the board to, although this is not the place of a public deal, to take an action to improve the speed with which the CAB committee of their design has been delayed, It's an opportunity for people not only to figure out solutions to it, but to figure out how to prevent such stupid things from going on in this district ever again. Although what they did a few years ago is now illegal. I would like to ask the board to speed up the process of getting the CAB committee going. Thank you very much for your time, and good night.
Dan Kroll.
My name is Dan Kroll. I live at 14223 Primrose Court in Poway. My youngest daughter graduated from Poway High 9 years ago. But as many of the people behind me know, I'm very involved in the school today and very aware of many of its goings-on. And I want to express my support for the unnamed principal of Painted Rock School. I've known her for over 20 years through teaching and voluntary activities. She has always been very logical in her thought process, open to feedback, is non-judgmental, always has the children and the family as her first priority. Represents the community and the school district in the best of ways. I speak with parents regularly, and they are almost without exception, other than the person behind me, complimentary of her role as principal at Painted Rock. She is a real asset to our school district in her role at Painted Rock. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We are on to item D, 101, ratification of student discipline. Dr. Robertson.
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight we bring forward to the board one ratification of student discipline for your action.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Wait, I'm going to take, how about a second? You do a second?
Second.
All right, motion by Board Member Patapow, second by Board Member Zane. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, and the motion passes unanimously. D, 102, ratification of stipulated agreement for student expulsion. That the recommendation is that the Board of Education approve and ratify the stipulated agreement for expulsion in the case number listed below. Dr. Robertson.
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight we bring forward one stipulated agreement for the board's action.
Okay, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
A motion by Board Member Zane, second by Board Member Patapow. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, and the motion passes unanimously. D, 103, public hearing and approval. So therefore, I'm opening up the public hearing and approval of the 2015-16 annual service plan and annual budget plan for the special education local plan area. The recommendation is that following the public hearing, the annual service plan and annual budget plan be approved. Dr. Robertson.
Tonight we bring forward to the board for your action and the public hearing our annual service and budget plan for special education. This plan is currently incorporated into our local budget plan.
Are there any questions?
Yes.
Yes. Board Member O'Connor-Radcliffe.
Dr. Robertson, I know I emailed you a bunch of these questions, but perhaps our last one we didn't get to it. There wasn't enough time before the meeting here. But the budget numbers that you sent me back on special education budget totals are different from what I'm seeing in the following pages. And I was just wondering if you could help me understand, because no matter how I look at it, I'm not seeing the numbers you gave me.
No problem. Ms. Lalonde will be able to help you with those numbers.
Perfect.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. The document that is included in the green sheets, which is labeled Annual Budget Plan for Fiscal Year 2015-16, it's kind of a different document because the numbers don't add up to the total expenditures. And the best way to explain it is if you have it in front of you. Row number 8.
Which one should I be looking for?
The document that was attached to the green sheet, it's labeled Annual Budget Plan Fiscal Year 2015-16.
Okay,
Item A is the revenues from federal, state, and general fund, $26.5 million. Items B, C, D, F, and G, if we had it, are items of expenditures based on the children that are grouped into different programs. We call it goal in financial terms. So if, for example, item B is goal 5001, it's administrative cost of the entire plan. But if you look at the next one, 5710, that's for infants, and so on and so forth. It's identifying the group of children. But if you look at item E, which is function, it's not a goal, it's function 1130, which means goal C and D are included in here. So that 11 million is a double counting, okay? So, and the reason they do this is because they are trying to describe the special education plan and how it offers services to our children. It's not an accounting document. But the numbers I give you follow total. So if you do the math now, it'll work. Yes.
Thank you. It looks like I just have to subtract that 11.6 million and I'm all good then.
If you subtract 11.6, you'll come up with 62 million. That includes transportation and the program piece of 57 million. Okay.
That explains the questions. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there any further questions? Okay, seeing no questions, is there a motion to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Actually, I guess we close. Are there any comments from members of the public, since this is a public hearing? And seeing none, yes, we have. Actually, could you approach the table, please?
Wayne Roundsville. I'm not opposed to the district's fine history of helping special education students, but when was this actually reviewed and discussed by the public?
Right now, currently, it's the process that it's required by state law to conduct a public hearing. It's really a formality. If anyone wants to shed any light beyond that.
Well, and the service plan and the budget plan is available to the public when we post the board. It says it's, and you can come see it with us and review it.
So we have 8 pages of codes and numbers, and we're supposed to look at this over the weekend. This is the first time I've ever seen this, and this is typical of some of your proposals. We're supposed to look through these things, do research, and know what exactly we're getting. Okay? I don't think we know what we're getting. As I said, I'm not opposed to the public, to the school district's plans, but it should be really easy to find out what they are rather than reading through a whole bunch of 9 pages, as it turns out, of references and codes that don't really tell you diddly squat about what the plan consists of, other than references to government documents and some school district other things, blah, blah, blah. Okay?
Mr. Roundsville, it actually does describe the services that we provide throughout our whole system.
Where?
Well, you can look at, starting on page 1, after you go through a couple, you can see the X's of what kinds of services we offer to our students throughout the district. It doesn't have any, doesn't tell you exactly how many kids have that
this
service,
page
but
1?
we can do that. No, it says the California Special Education Information System. It's called CaseMIS across the top. Do you have that report?
Yeah.
So that has a lot of the services that we offer our students, and it lets you know what we offer them. And then the coding just speaks to the different kinds of services we have at the different schools. And if you look at the bottom of, let's say, page 1 of 3 of all the codings, it starts to speak to what some of these codes are at our different schools. They're not all illuminated in there, which is why we make the plan available, and we are happy to speak with you around all of these services we offer our students.
So that's new information to me. Why hasn't that been offered before? And I'm saying, I'm just questioning or asking questions about this particular plan.
Well, we bring,
This is typical subterfuge, as far as I'm concerned, about informing the public of what you'd spend your money on.
Mr. Rounsaville, we bring this report annually to the board. We've
2
been
days
doing-
before the board meeting where you're going to approve
Well,
it.
I think it was posted last Thursday.
Oh,
We
I'm
are.
sorry, that's
I-
4 days before the meeting where you're going to approve it.
This evening, we're in the process, we were going to be approving, actually, we have already approved the board-controlled advisory, board budget review advisory committee, so that may be a place where these appropriations can be looked into. Otherwise, as Dr. Robertson said, you could follow up with her with regard to the specifics.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our public hearing. I think, did we have a motion by Board Member O'Connor-Ratcliffe? Yes, a second by Board Member Patapow. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed, and the motion passes unanimously. D104, adoption of the PUSD Local Control and Accountability Plan LCAP for 15-16. The recommendation is that the board approve the PUSD Local Accountability Plan. Associate Superintendents Robertson and Thalandi.
You want me to speak? So last week, Ms. Thalandi and I and Ms. Hogarth presented the goals, action, services, and the initial budget to the board and community, and tonight we're asking your action to move forward on these goals.
Okay, are there any questions? We've had two board meetings where we've exhaustively been through the LCAPs. Wonderful presentation last meeting.
Thank you.
That was the 15th. All the meetings are blended together. So
Thank you.
thank you to both associate superintendents. Yes.
I don't have a question, but I did want to make a comment about that these 5 goals address a lot of our needs and multiple appropriate ways to measure our success under each one. So thank you. Well, I guess first, thank you to all the community members who gave your input, because we couldn't have done it without you. And thank you to Dr. Robertson's crew for your very hard work on this. I really appreciate it, and working to incorporate all that input. I appreciate that you're also very responsive to many of the board's comments in the last 2 meetings where we heard this for the first and second time, this being the third. I don't know, I could go into a few of the things I'm very excited about, but I am excited about a lot that's in the plan. So I'll leave it to thank you very much for all the time you put in, and thanks.
You're welcome.
Yes, Mr. Zane.
I'm going to second Board Member O'Connor-Ratcliffe's comments, but do so with a motion to approve.
Okay. We have a motion by Board Member Zane, second by Board Member Patapow. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, and the motion to approve LCAP for 15-16 has passed unanimously. Yeah, that was in the contract report. Okay, D301 is the adoption of the 15-16 proposed budget, approval of related criteria and standards. The recommendation is that the 15-16 proposed budget and criteria and standards be approved. Associate Superintendent Thalandi.
Thank you, Madam President. Last week, Monday, June 15th, we did the public hearing and presentation of the 2015-16 proposed budget, which was built on the Governor's May revisions. Tonight, we are requesting board approval on the 15-16 projected budget as well as the multi-year projection.
Are there any questions from the board? Mr. Sellers.
I have a comment more than a question, which is I've been pretty clear in the past about my view of deficit spending and the concern I have about the budget and the long-term sustainability of the district. And I'm going to vote in favor of this budget. And the reason for it is because in the current year, which is to say 15-16, or the real year I'll call it, we do show an excess of revenues over expenditures of $7.6 million. Now, unfortunately, the budget does show deficits in the succeeding years of $8 million, and I believe 18 in the one following that. Oh, the other way around, sorry. I think it's 12 million and 8.5 million. But we've been assured repeatedly by Associate Superintendent Thalandi that these numbers are not hard, that they are soft and somewhat voodoo-esque, and as time goes on, they firm up, and in particular, the farther out they get, the less reliable they become. And so it's on that expert opinion. I'm going to support the approval of this budget, primarily for the fact that the one we have that I call the real budget going into next year does show a positive excess of revenues over expenses. Thank you. And thank you for all your work, Malika.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions? Is there a motion to approve the proposed 15-16 budget?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, with a motion by Board Member Zane, seconded by Board Member Patapow. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed, and the budget for 15-16 passes unanimously. D302, approval of Resolution 108, 2015, entitled Authorization to Allocate the Monies Received from the Education Protection Act, EPA. Associate Superintendent Thalandi.
Thank you, Madam President. This green sheet reflects the Proposition 30 that was approved by the voters in November 2012. When we did that, we gave approval to the increase for sales tax as well as state personal income tax. Those funds are now given to us as part of the local control funding formula. However, the governor decided to allocate those funds as a grant. So it's called the Education Protection Act grant, and for Poway for 2015-16 for our district, that's about $41.8 million. We are required to bring this in a public meeting to the board and also state that the 41.8, none of that will be used for administrative salaries or administrative expenses. And in our district, we use them for secondary school teacher salaries and expenses. Once the board approves this, we are to post this information on our website so that the public can see how the Proposition 30 monies are being used in the 15-16 school year.
Are there any questions? Okay, we have a motion by Board Member Patapow to approve. Second by Board Member Zane. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the resolution to authorization to allocate monies received from the Education Protection Act, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, and the motion passes unanimously. D303, approval of resolution 107, 2015, entitled Authorization to Identify the Amount of Budget Reductions Needed in the 16-17 and 17-18 school year, with the recommendation that this be approved. Associate Superintendent Thalandi.
Thank you, Madam President. This is a requirement from the County Office of Education. When we do the multi-year projection, they want to ensure that the board has been made aware if there are cuts in 16-17 or in 17-18. Fortunately for us, there are no cuts projected in 16-17, no matter what formula we use, whether we use the Conservative School Services formula or if we use the Department of Finances. However, using School Services of California formula in 17-18, we're looking at cutting $16.1 million. If the Department Finance formula is used, there are no cuts in 17-18 as well. This document will be filed along with the budget documents to the County Office of Education.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board? Okay, is there a motion to approve D303? Motion by Board Member O'Connor Radcliffe. Is there a second? Second by Board Member Patapow. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, and the motion passes unanimously. Now we're going to just briefly skip to my first pulled item, and that was E304. I think that was the contractual report. Ms. Lalonde, should I just ask the question?
Yes,
So
Ms.
that
Beatty.
was with regard to the legal fees, and I think you had answered it before as far as the, so I'm just confirming that those contracts, they're still based on an hourly rate, and so that we're not obligated to use up that sum of money, say it's $3,000 to.
That is correct. When we do the contracts, we look at what we have spent in the prior year, and knowing facts in the district, we may increase it or decrease it. And then it is, in order to issue a purchase order that we do this, we need board approval for the contracts. And then next month, you'll see the purchase orders being issued. But that's not to say that's the full amount that will be spent in the following year.
And the purchase orders are for business done, for already expenses accrued?
Yes, sometimes they are for expenses accrued by the month. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it could be what we call open purchase orders, because it is not, sometimes it's not possible to keep issuing purchase orders every month. So we will do what is called open purchase orders. So 2 types of purchase orders.
Okay, are there any other questions on the E304, which is the contractual services report? Okay, since I pulled this item, then I will move to approve. Is there a second? Second. A motion by Board Member Beatty, second by Board Member Patapower. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving E304, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, and the motion passes unanimously. And our next item is the second pulled item from the consent calendar, and that is (311). Oh, I think I pulled it from my docket and put it back elsewhere, and I know what it was. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I read it too. So this was the authorization to award a contract for bid for the district mobile application development. Ms. Lalonde, did you want me to ask the question or go ahead and?
Yes, if you would ask the question.
Okay.
And Dr. Newman, if there are any technical questions, if you could come up to answer them, please.
Okay, it's really not technical so much as ideally I think it would be for a program such as this to find out if it really has, is paying dividends, so to speak, to have a pilot program. So the question is, would it be possible to have this after the 1 year? It's a 1 year contract with an option to renew for 4 additional 1 years. So my request would be that we come back to find out how much, and maybe I should well, perhaps Mr. Newman could come up and just explain what it is, at least for the benefit of the board and the audience. That would be helpful, because this is a new program we're implementing for $50,000.
Sure. As part of the process to increase communication, the mobile app would centralize many of the options across our district, from social media to, if you're looking at school sites, for scores to go on, and to be able to be communicated out, as well as communication from the board, the superintendent, and such. So we put out an extensive RFP to look at a variety of options within that app, and build it out in that way, so that we weren't just purchasing an app that wouldn't fit our needs for now and in the future.
And so I guess my question would be, because we're bearing an additional expenditure, is this warranted as opposed to just making mobile-friendly websites? And we're already integrating a lot of our technologies.
So one of the pieces that from the start we've heard about is increased communication and transparency. And so I think at one of the meetings you shared with me the need to have so many sites for staff and for parents in particular to access. How do we integrate all of that so we can communicate in an effective manner with all of our parents, staff, and communities, and the range of things from elementary to high school? The small things from a tip line that we wanted to build in if there was an issue on a site, to your lunch or down the road with your bus pass, or the variety of options so that we can grow into it and ensure effectively not only communicating but enhancing the way our staff, students, and parents really utilize options within the district.
So in all of that, we're doing consolidating anyway with consolidating our like synergy and Connect Ed, but again, it goes to the question is, I mean, you could do all that and just have it on a website that's mobile friendly potentially, and so I guess the broader question is, can we look at this as kind of a pilot year, and then at the end of that year reevaluate it, its usefulness.
Yeah, I think with all of our options when we go forward with contracts, to look at the usefulness and effectiveness at the end of a year. But a website wouldn't just work for this, in part because you can't do push notifications in the same way. You can't have the variety of things linking through it. So the idea was to really work with a company to build out the app, as many districts have done now across the country, and saying, how do we really improve communication and facilitate that process?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Newman. Are there any further questions?
Thank you, Dr. Newman.
Okay, thank you. All right, since I pulled that, I will move to approve E311. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Board Member Beatty, second by Board Member Sane. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, and the motion passes unanimously. And now we are on to D501, approval of Resolution 109, 2015, entitled Authorizing a Change in Mode from the Initial Mode to the Unenhanced Extended Rate Mode with respect to the Poway Unified School District Certificates of Participation, authorizing the execution and delivery by the district of an owner consent, approving unenhanced extended rate mode additional provisions for said certificates, and authorizing the execution of necessary documents and certificates of related actions. Yes, that's a mouthful. Associate Superintendent Thalandi.
Thank you, Ms. Beatty. U.S. Bank holds the papers for our certificates of participation, or COPs. It is a financing mechanism that we entered into 3 years ago, and at that time the interest rate was fixed for 3 years at an average of 2.5%. That interest rate expires on September 1st, 2015. We now have to, in a way, refinance. But so we want to do it for another 3-year period, with the board's approval, and we are saying the interest rate will not exceed 2.9%. So we have had some interest rates from 1 year to 2 year and 3 years, which is included in the green sheet, but it is cost prohibitive to do it every year. We'd rather do it once in 3 years. And it's a routine procedure, but we need the board's approval in order to do that. And the funds that we use to pay these loans back are from the improvement areas from the CFDs, some of the CFDs, and they're all listed on the green sheet in the second paragraph for the board's information.
Are there any questions from the board? Ms. O'Connor-Red.
I just have a really quick one. You list the current rates for a 3-year fixed at 1.8 to 1.95, but you say it's going to be lower than 2.9. Just
Yes.
very, very conservative upper end.
Well, what happens is these are the rates right now. The market keeps fluctuating, and we will not be closing this till the end of August, so it could change. So just so we have protection there, we say not to exceed 2.9. But Sandy Burgoyne, Director of Planning, has been working with the consultants, and it may come in at 2.5 or even 2.6.
Any further questions? Actually, I have a question that has to do with the second paragraph. That caught my eye was the $12 million to fund the Rancho Bernardo High School HVAC. And I was a bit confused because it said it was the 2012 funding program, and I remember that was an appropriation done from a bond issue or a refinancing structure of CFDs 210 and 11. Ms. Burgoyne probably recollects, and this was March of 2013, and at that time we were told, I think it was $14 million going to HVACs, getting closer, HVACs for RB and Rancho Bernardo. So, is that on?
Yes.
Thank you. We had an original loan with U.S. Bank, and we renegotiated it. It was a $35 million loan, and we refinanced it with all the cost of issuance and everything, and we added an additional $12.3 million to specifically pay for the Rancho Bernardo High School air conditioning unit.
Okay.
So it was the same loan.
So, but the 23rd, what I'm remembering was that March of 2013, that was the 14 million, that money was going to the HVACs. Is that different?
You
Is
know,
it was-
2013, being that we've done 20 different issuances in the last 4
Yeah.
years, 2013 may have been, and I'd have to look at my records so I can get that to you, but it might have been the issuances of CFD 11 bonds, which
And
would,
10 was definitely
yeah,
part
so
of that.
it could have been that, or it could
And
have
it
been
was for
two.
Mount Carmel was only getting I thought it was this 12 million was
Yeah,
going
but
to
it
Rancho
wasn't. It was
Bernardo.
not RB High School, so I can check that out for you and get the information
Okay.
to you.
Okay, so that surplus money then was not a straight cash transaction. Then it was being used to pay the debt service on this financing.
If you're talking about the 2013 issuance, that would have been an issuance for capital facilities projects for school facilities. The U.S. Bank revenue is revenue that we use from the revenues from the surplus special of the improvement areas. So that money went to the RB High School.
And that's the surplus funds pay the debt service on this low interest
57.3
rate.
million,
loan.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
We have a whole presentation for the next agenda item.
So you're going to stay. Okay. All right, are there any further questions for D501? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve authorizing the new rate mode adjustment period and adjustment interest rate parameters? Yes, and that the superintendent or designee execute the necessary documents. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Motion by Board Member Zane, second by Board Member O'Connor Radcliffe. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, and the motion passes unanimously. And now we are on to D502. D502, approval of Resolution 71, 2015 through 106, 2015, entitled Establishment of Annual Special Taxes for Community Facilities Districts Numbers 1 through 15. Associate Superintendent Thalandi and Ms. Burgoyne.
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight we are requesting approval for the levy of annual special taxes for our CFDs 1 through 15. You will notice that CFD 16 is not listed here because we have not started collecting taxes on those homes. Sandy Burgoyne and Justin from the Lincoln Group and Warren Diven are here to do the presentation for us tonight.
Before you start, can I just say quickly, I'm so pleased to have gotten that a little bit in advance. That really helps me now. I don't have to be looking at the small print. So.
And I would like to apologize for the lateness, but we found some surplus in CFD number 1 that we wanted to make sure that we used to reduce the taxes for this year. So because we know we have somebody that's near and dear to that.
That was for me, right? All right, welcome. Thank you.
So this is a resolution where we have to set the taxes every year, and the reason we do it in June is because it has to be down to the county tax assessors before August 10th. So since we do not have a board meeting in July, we always bring it in June. And when we were talking, we thought it would be better to show you visually the numbers. We put all this information on our website. It's very readily available, but generally we just bring forward the resolution and you see the whole number and you see where the numbers are, how much the taxes are. So we thought we would break it out and show you a little bit in summarization as to how that money is spent. So first of all, I just wanted to show you some of the pretty houses that have been built because, as you know, the purpose for the Melrose tax was as a result of the Prop 13. And our district has been a great recipient of revenues from the Melrose districts, which has funded several of our schools on the west side, and we have used revenues to help in some other schools. So we always like to show where that money goes to. As you notice, I'm not putting the schools on this time because we always tout them. We never show where the people are coming from. So here is our CFD map. The district is 99 square miles, and for informational purposes, I like to tell people, especially when we do our ratings, 37% is Poway, 48% is the city of San Diego, and 15% is the county. The county's Forest Ranch and Santa Fe Valley. Right now, we have over 28,900 parcels in our district. That is not all the parcels in the CFD district. There's still approximately 8 to 1,000 homes that are being built on the west side. We have CFD 1 through 16 here, but for the rest of the presentation, since we are not taxing 16 at this time, it will not be in the presentation. Okay, Justin, you can do that.
Hello, my name is Justin Bjorgen. I work with the Delinka Group, as Malaga said. I've been working as the administrator on behalf of Poway Unified School District with the Community Facilities Districts for the last 9 years, so I'm very familiar with the taxes and how they're calculated and how we implement them with the county. This slide right here is just the covenant to levy the special tax. Every time we present bond documents for the board approval, this is listed under the covenants in the bond indenture. And this is just saying that the board and the school district will covenant to levy the special tax in accordance with the special tax RMA and pursuant to the Mello-Roos Act, and that the computation of the levy will be completed and transmitted to the auditor of the County of San Diego before the final date, which is August 10th, is what Sandy said earlier. So that's why we're asking the board to approve the special taxes tonight, as this is the only regular scheduled board meeting before the August 10th deadline. Here is the whole representation of the entire levy for fiscal year 15-16. What we've done is kind of group the CFDs into 3 separate areas. We have CFD number 1, which is the school district's oldest and largest CFD. That mitigated specific schools that we'll go into a little bit later. We then separated it by the school district CFDs that funding school facilities, so that'll be CFDs 2 through 15. CFD number 1 also funded school facilities, but it had a different mitigation agreement, so that's why we're separating the two. And then finally, we have the improvement areas, which is the city overlay tax, and this is where the school district has mitigated that they could use these surplus special taxes for school facilities. The total levy as a whole is about $45.8 million. And as you can see, 93.3% of that levy supports some sort of debt service of the school district. About 72 of it goes to repay debt service for all the bonds that we've issued for the school district to build those school facilities and the non-school facilities. That includes a lot of the debt service that the board has refunded this year. So if we hadn't done those refundings, those amounts would be a little bit higher, but now that we've reduced those obligations, we're able to move more of that money into the surplus area to back the joint acquisition agreement and the certificates of participation.
We will start with CFD number 1, and as a reminder, the elementary schools and the middle school and the high school that were built using Mello-Roos money from CFD 1 were Highland Ranch, Shoal Creek, Creekside, Adobe Bluffs, and Park Village. And I apologize for the white if you can't read it very well. My GIS person is on vacation, and it took me 4 hours to make a change on one slide. Middle school is Mesa Verde Middle School, and Westview is the high school. Now, as a reminder, CFD 1 is a very mature Mello-Roos district. It's almost 25 years old. We're going to show you an example in a few minutes. A lot of the parcels are dropping off. If you look at the summary, you might wonder why on the left-hand column there's like 8,000 some parcels, but only 5,000 of them are being taxed. That's because all of those other parcels have met their 25-year mitigation, and they are no longer paying CFD1 tax. CFD1 revenues, very specific. It was prior, and the money was used to build schools. That was all you could do, is build schools. So we've been very proactive whenever we could, is reducing the taxes or calling bonds. We cannot use this revenue for any other purpose. Sort of a disadvantage because we have some construction going on in an area which some of you have heard of. It's called Merge 56, or the Roads Project. Some of those are in CFD number 1. We will tax them. We will not be able to use that revenue for anything other than reducing taxes and calling bonds. Okay, Justin.
Page 6 represents what the levy for CFD number 1 will be utilized for. We are going to be levying approximately $3.8 million for CFD number 1. Of that amount, 97.1% will be utilized for debt service, and the rest will be used as the cap of administrative expenses and kind of our threshold for anticipated delinquencies. The total debt service for CFD number 1, though, is about $5 million. So what we're doing to make up that difference is utilizing surplus special taxes from previous years so that we could use those monies to pay that debt service and reduce the taxes of CFD number 1 in 1516.
This is a slide I love to show because there are a lot of people in CFD1, and one of our directors that is sitting in the audience who lives in CFD1 doesn't have a clue what his taxes are because it's impounded. So what I had Justin do is take a parcel that started paying from day one, and we showed what their tax is currently, but what it could have been. And if you look over in the right-hand column, you will see the reductions that we were able to implement during those years when we had surplus money. And the reason why we were so delayed is originally we had about a 4% savings this year, but because of the surplus revenues that Justin said we were working on, we were able to increase that reduction to 8%.
Yeah, just as Sandy said on this slide, you can see, as she said a little bit earlier, the parcels in CFD number 1 pay the tax for 25 years. So this is a sample parcel in CFD number 1 that has a square footage of greater than 2,500 square feet. That was first developed in 1991, and you can see the whole 25-year history, taxing history of that parcel. Currently, if we would have levied the tax in 1991, the tax would have been $901.10. The rate and method of apportionment, which is the document that dictates how the tax is to be levied, would allow the school district to escalate that tax annually by 2%. And through the magic of compound interest, that tax today would be $1,449.36. But because the school district has implemented a bunch of administrative reductions in 1995 and 2001 and everything listed in that table right there, we have been able to reduce that tax cumulatively by 41.5%. And you can see that we're going to submit, with the board's approval, the 1516 tax at $847.58, which is actually lower than what they originally paid in 1991-1992.
Would you like to tell them how many parcels? Next, we will go through to CFDs number 2 through 15, 16, new CFD, no revenues. The construction of the revenues used for these were, of course, for construction of Stone Ranch, Monterey Ridge, Willow Grove, Del Sur, Oak Valley, Del Norte, Design 39. And we also used some revenues for expansions at Black Mountain, Mount Carmel, Morning Creek, Meadowbrook, Mount Carmel, Adobe Bluffs, Deer Canyon, Mesa Verde, and Westview High School. You'll notice also that we have little green arrows. People forget that there was a time when Forest Ranch was developing and there was no schools there, and there was Santa Fe Valley, and we were actually busing students to Rolling Hills, Los Penasquitos, Black Mountain, and Mount Carmel. So we used some of those revenues for interim housing.
Slide 9 is language from the joint acquisition agreement, which is one of the bond documents that was passed by the board in 2014 for the $40 million bond that was needed to finish the construction of the Design 39 campus. Because those revenues to finish, or to, because the surplus special taxes of the CFDs are utilized to make those payments on those bonds, in that document, the board agreed that they would not reduce those special taxes to ensure that there'd be enough money to make those payments on the 2014 debt. Page 10 also includes the pie graph of what the CFDs 2 through 15 uses will be of the special taxes. 70.35% of it will be utilized for debt service on senior debt. 23.94% of it will be utilized and pledged to the joint acquisition agreements. We've also provided a little update on how much development's been occurring within the CFD. And you can see that CFD 15, which is hopefully going to be the primary source for that $40 million debt, is building at a faster rate than that was anticipated, and they pulled 246 building permits this year. Page 11 provides just a spreadsheet of all the special taxes for each CFD. The first column will be the CFD number. Next to that will be the build-out status, and that just means if there's undeveloped parcels, are development still occurring within that CFD. Next, we have the total proposed levy for fiscal year 15-16. Next to that is the administrative cap for each CFD. That's how much money is slated to go to the school district to reimburse them for administrative expenses for administering the CFD. That doesn't mean the school district's going to utilize all that money, but that's the money that's set aside to them in the bond documents. Next, we have the senior debt service on those bonds, and then what we anticipate the delinquencies to be for fiscal year 15-16 based on the 14-15 tax rates that we just got. Next to that column, you'll see the joint acquisition agreement, and you'll see the CFDs that are pledged to repay that joint acquisition agreement, which include the 10 participating CFDs of 2, 4, 6, 8 improvement area B, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, and 15. And the next to that would just be the available special taxes, and those the surplus special taxes for the CFDs that are not in that participating CFD for the joint acquisition agreement, which would include 2 improvement area 1, 3, 5, 7, 10, improvement area F, and the 11 zones 1 through 3.
So before we go to the improvement areas, the revenues that we're receiving and the debt that we are now paying off, the last estimate that I have for total construction of all the projects that I mentioned previously, almost $430 million of CFD contributions. So with that, we're going to go now to the improvement areas. Improvement areas, we negotiated with Forest Ranch CFD 6, Torrey Highlands CFD 10, Stonebridge CFD 11, Del Sur CFD 14s, and CFD 15. And these are the improvement area revenues that Justin and I explained before, and you just passed the resolution on the U.S. Bank certificates of participation.
Page 13 includes language in each of those CFD's mitigation agreements, which allow for the use of the surplus special taxes to be utilized for school facilities. So again, this is just reiterating that the surplus special taxes are allowed to be used by the school district for school facilities, and that we are currently using them to assist in making payments on the certificates of participation, just to make sure that there's no hit to the general fund to make those payments. Page 14 includes the same summary that you've seen before for CFDs number 1 and 2 through 15, but this is just for the improvement areas. As you can see, 68.03% of the levy will be utilized for debt. 22.6% will be utilized for the COPS, or the certificates of participation. And then we also have 5.19% money utilized for city improvements, or non-school facilities. That is money from CFD's 15 improvement areas B through 15 improvement areas D. And we'll go to the next slide. And those mitigation agreements state that you cannot use the surplus special taxes for those bonds until the bonds have been sold. So that money is the developer's money until bonds are sold, and I think 15 Improvement Area C is planning on issuing debt very shortly.
Then we come to the administration reports, which you all received complimentary copies in rough draft. These, I'm going to have Justin go into a little bit more detail, but I know, Michelle, you were overwhelmed in January when we gave you a mandatory continuing disclosure document. These administration reports are not required. I have required them since 2000, and Delinka Group has provided us for them. It's sort of a summary of what has gone on in the CFD for the year. These reports are all filed. They're on our tax website. Every year they're on there now. We might have pulled some off because we're running out of space. So I'm going to have Justin just give you a thumbnail summary of what is in those reports, because some of them are 600 and some pages long. That's because you have the rate and method of apportionment, which is the legal document, and then you have every parcel in that CFD. So CFD 1 is about a 650-page document.
So the reports can be broken down into 6 sections. The first section is just a summary of the previous year's fiscal year's tax with a statement on what the current delinquencies are. Section 2 is just a kind of overview of all the account balances and the financial activity that's happened within that CFD. All those activities are with the funds that are being held with the fiscal agent. In this case, it's Zion's Bank, and Delinka Group, as part of their process for administering the bonds, will also audit all the things that are happening within Zion's Bank accounts and make sure it's happening pursuant to the bond indentures that the board's approved for those bonds. Section 3 is required for every CFD formed after 2001, and that's Senate Bill 165, and that's just kind of an accountability for all the bonds that have been sold by the school district. It gives an outline of how much bonds were sold, what they were used for, and a detailed accounting for the uses of any construction fund and what the money was used for. Finally, Section 4 is the special tax requirement. That's kind of where we list the funds on account for 14-15 and the obligations that are remaining for 14-15 and the obligations that are on tap for 15-16 and how we're going to pay them through the levy of the special tax. Section 5 is the status of development, where you'll see any changes in the development in the CFD, if there's been additional permits being pulled or if parcels have prepaid. And then finally, we do a summary of the fiscal year 15-16 special tax levy, where we talk about the special tax rates and how many units are in each special tax class. And as Sandy mentioned, the exhibits also include a copy of the rate and method of apportionment, which is the document that dictates how the tax will be calculated, as well as a copy of the exhibit file that we send to the county, which includes every single parcel with that parcel special tax.
And with that, I also want to mention to the board that that California Tax Data website also has all of the documents related to the general obligation bonds. So it has all of the district's debt for capital facilities. And I hear a lot of time people make comments. These are independent financing agencies. They have no relationship to the general fund. The general fund is not obligated to them. The CFDs are not obligated to the general fund. They are each an independent entity. So they're rated according that way. The general obligation bonds are rated according to that way. So again, all the information regarding all of this, we have month-by-month expenditures on some of them when we have construction going on, are on that tax website, and they've been on the tax website, so anybody can access them.
And then finally, we're just providing a brief timeline of the special tax timeline. Tonight, we're asking the board to approve the special tax levies. Then it'll be my responsibility to get those special tax levies enrolled with the County of San Diego by August 10th. Then you can see that the County of San Diego then will prepare all the tax rolls with the assessed value taxes and the Melrose taxes, and mail those out in October. The first installment will be due December 10th. The money will then be paid to the county and trickle through to the fiscal agent to pay debt that's due March 1st. The second installment of those taxes would be due April 10th, and then again that money would trickle through the fiscal agent to pay the debt that's due September 1st of 2016.
Yes, Board Member O'Connor Ratcliffe, you have a question? A few?
I'm going to take a little issue with overwhelmed. Come on now. It was, 2,000 pages of material. Okay, I was overwhelmed. But for these ones, I'm going to say that the first 6 pages of each one were very readable. Really, about through page 6. I want to go back to CFD 1. You mentioned Rose Crossing and Merge 56. This actually didn't occur to me before, but since you mentioned it,
I have the attorney here, so the attorney's here to answer any questions.
Well, I know the first round of new homes just opened their model homes this past weekend, actually, the KB home stuff. So they'll be taxed, but only to pay off existing debt, nothing else. So how does that affect the older CFD1 homes? And are they going to pay the same amounts as those new homes? Are they going to get a reduced rate? How does that work? Because clearly the new CFD homes that's going to be paid off well before they get to 25 years.
Unfortunately, those homes will be paying a reduced tax for the school district,
lucky.
and that money will be utilized to reduce everyone else's taxes in CP number 1 also.
So they'll all pay the same proportionate amount. Yeah. The reason we can't use the money for anything except to pay debt service on the bonds is because we have built all of the authorized facilities that could be financed through CFD number 1.
Board Member Zane.
I have a general question about the whole concept of delinquencies here. How does one become delinquent on some of these payments? I know the cost for administering them is relatively high, and I don't budget for delinquent credit card payments. So how does this?
It would just
not
be
that I've ever had any. I'm just saying.
It would just be a homeowner not paying their property tax. So what we do is we monitor the level of delinquencies on the CFD, and we monitor it to make sure that there's enough money coming in to make the payments for those CFDs. The total delinquency rate within the school district is really, really low, so it's nothing we have to worry about in terms of making our debt. We have a 10% coverage on all our CFDs. That's typically industry standard for Melrose debt. And right now our current delinquency rate is 1% in the school district. So there's no worry that we're not going to make any of our payments, but it is something we monitor just in case.
I got you. So it's not a delinquency on the district's part, it's delinquency on the taxpayer.
Correct.
I got you.
Well, the beauty of the delinquencies is the district can foreclose on a property. We have foreclosure rights over the county. So we have priority, and the attorney back here can foreclose in 90 days. We've never done it. We've worked through, we try to work through the homeowners, and then what our legal department does is they find out who owns the parcel, and generally your creditor or the bank will end up paying the property tax or the CFD tax. They don't pay the property taxes. They're not obligated to.
Board Member Sellers.
Can I make one comment? Correct me if I'm wrong. Yes, Michelle, they're getting a bargain on their tax, but they're not getting any new facilities either. So as a result, it all comes out in the wash.
And with the Melrose Law, the way it was, I always like to reiterate, CFD1, the students got a seat. We don't have to put them in a school that was built with CFD1 revenues. CFD 2 through 15, revenue, student follows revenue.
It's very readily apparent in my house.
I just had a couple of questions. Initially, you said you mentioned the percentages. Is that land mass? Is that value, dollar value? When you were talking about, the 38% was Poway. Were you talking about
Land mass.
Land mass.
Yeah.
Okay. And the administrative expenses then, does that go to pay? Is the planning department expenses? Does it go to the consultants? Are they on a separate contract?
Well, if you look, when you're all reading your administrative reports, there's a section in it that specifically identifies, and it gives you a definition for administrative expenses. They're ordinary and necessary expenses incurred by the school district on behalf of the CFD related to determination of the amount of the levy of special taxes, collection of special taxes, including reasonable expenses of collecting delinquencies, administration of bonds, proportionate payment salaries, and benefits of any school district employees. Duties are directly related to administration of CFDs. Reasonable costs otherwise incurred in order to carry out the authorized purposes of the CFDs. Some of the categories we pay legal fees. We've paid in the last couple of years. We've had some high legal fees for public records requests on CFDs, forensic audits. We pay the City of San Diego because we actually do have some unused property that is outside of our district, and we have to pay property taxes on it. We use it for legal opinions, consultations. We also have Bond Logistics, who does our arbitrage. We have the website that we use, our special tax consultant, financial advisor when we use their services, and yes, a percentage of it does go to my entire department. A percentage of my entire department is allocated. We're not an impact on the general fund. Also, when we have construction projects going, then a percentage of those revenues from those CFDs can be used to pay, like, for part of Michael's salaries because he is doing CFD work.
Thank you. And then I think it was CFD1, you mentioned $430 million. There was so much information. It was a terrific report. I think I needed about 5 more times to at least to assimilate all the information.
And watch it on video.
That's right. So you said $430 million. You were talking about, I think it was it CFD1 or 2 through all the schools? What was the $430 million?
$430 million was not CFD1. That was just for the new schools, 2 through 15.
And that's and what does that number represent?
What it cost for us to build those schools. Okay. That was the construction cost.
Now that's construction costs, so not total debt service or included, or
no,
just
but we can
straight. No, that's fine. I just wanted to know what the, so, okay, this cost of the schools. And then just a last question. There was, in my Google alerts, there was a mention, this goes to, you're talking about the people conflating the operational budget and these, the CFDs and SFID special taxes. I think it was the SFID, they said there was a recent downgrade in the rating. It would have been on watch, and then it was downgraded. And one of the things was in the report, it was some regulatory agency or whatever report. It kept referring to the district, and I found that confusing because you think of the district as the school district, and not
the downgrading. I think you're referring to, and it has not been finalized, is Moody's, and it was for our general obligation bonds, and it went from an AA3 to a AA2 to a AA3, correct? And it was because of the fiscal position of the district at the time for fiscal year 15-16.
So when you say fiscal position of the district, are you talking about?
General fund. We have been arguing with them for 15 years that our general obligation bonds are a direct commitment from our property taxes, and our CFDs are from land secured debt. They still look at the general fund, and their response, all the rating agencies say, because they look at it for management of the general fund budget. So they always look at that, and because Malaga's ending balance, which I think is rather substantial, they're looking at it as an issue. Now, they removed the negative watch, which I said to them, well, thank you very much, but they downgraded it by one. And they're doing it to other school districts.
May I add to that, Sandy? I was in the conversation with Moody's when they questioned us, and as Mr. Sellers pointed out, it's the deficit in the following year that they are concerned about. And though I mentioned to them that this is a very conservative estimate, they do not take the time to understand those pieces. And so they said, well, and we also explained that the general fund is not obligated in any way to pay any of these debts. We have revenue sources for every single bond issuance in CFD as well as SFID. They just have like a checkoff list, and if it is deficit 2 years out, they mark you down.
Yeah, I do find that perplexing because legally, the GO bonds, the only source is the property tax, the homeowner property tax, and the SFID. And that, the county treasurer can take whatever they need to service the debt. So that is bizarre because that's state law.
Yes.
Right.
After the conversation with Moody's, where Sandy and I were in a conference call with them, and they would not, they refused to understand what I was trying to say, I called our auditor because I was upset that Moody's would downgrade us.
Yeah.
And I said, what is, in your opinion, what do you think? And so the auditor said that if any of the CFD debt or the SFID debt did not have a revenue source, which you can show us 30 years, 40 years from now that you'll be able to pay the debt, we would be concerned. But for Poway, we are not concerned, is what the auditor said.
I don't know if a letter from the county treasurer or something, just because of the legal obligation issue, if that would make a difference.
Unfortunately, it's because it's nationwide, so it's not just California. It's, they can do what they want to do.
Because it raises the borrowing costs, right, of the,
right.
Or actually, was the downgrade was on the bonds, right?
It was on the general obligation bonds.
Okay, so it has no bearing
on
then.
CFDs,
Okay.
no.
All right, that's all my questions. Any further questions from the board? Okay, thank you very much for putting that presentation together. That was great.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to approve D502 resolutions? Establishment of annual special taxes for community facilities districts numbers 1 through 15. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Board Member O'Connor Radcliffe. Is there a second by Board Member Zane? Is there any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the motion passes unanimously. There are no first reading items. First information item is G320, the enrollment report. Ms. Thalandi.
Thank you, Madam President. This is the routine monthly enrollment report we bring for the district. This is based on report number 9. Month number 9, which is April 6, 2015 to May 1st, 2015. Our enrollment is holding steady on our attendance, on which the budget is based, is 96.6%.
Are there any questions? This is just an information item only. Okay, all right, no questions. Mr. Sellers.
I had one question. It might actually be more appropriate to Dr. Robertson. My understanding is that Mount Carmel is the open enrollment high school. Is that correct? Or is there no such thing anymore? Am I living in the past?
We do. We keep it open enrolled until before school starts. And then if we get additional students that come from the outside, we'd like to add them. They go to all schools.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Okay, seeing none. G 321, summary of the school nutrition program, administrative review audit. Ms. Lalonde.
Thank you, Madam President. This was the administrative review or the audit by California Department of Education Food and Nutrition Program. The auditor came down to our district office, met with our Director of Food and Nutrition, Mr. Louis Barber, as well as they visited 4 of our school sites. They visited Del Norte High School, Meadowbrook Middle School, Sunset Hills Elementary, and Westwood Elementary. And they did have some findings which you had questioned me on, minor findings, but they did write those up, and we are doing corrective actions right now, informing the principals. I think there was a question from the board on that.
I just had that one follow-up that I didn't get the answer to beforehand about competitive food sales at school sites need to stop. That's school clubs doing bake sales?
Yes, but they were more concentrating on the food sales at ASBs and student stores in addition to food sales, bake sales.
Okay.
Yes.
So they're not talking about like the a la carte menu items, you know, the kids that. Okay.
But we're gonna follow their recommendation and cut all those out.
Is Lou here? Oh, he's gone. Okay. Yes, we Dr. Robertson and Dr. Collins have both sent out memos to all the school site principals informing them that there are very strict rules as far as nutrition now, and so we are required to follow those. The auditor was very pleased with our food and nutrition program, and he praised Lou highly. I wish Lou had been here. Dr. Collins and Dr. Robertson both met with Lou when the auditor came to see us, and they gave us glowing reports of the entire program in the district.
So I don't know if it's a good question to ask without Lou here, but I was wondering if you could just briefly summarize the findings, the 3 findings and the 5 technical. Or expand rather.
Yes, on the findings, Ms. Beatty, it's on the second page. The first one was that we have a board policy on local wellness policy and administrative procedures, but they recommended that we update that because we have some language there that we need to include our extended student services programs. So we are looking into that over the summer. We'll fix those. The second one is the competitive food sales. That's to do with the bake sales as well as the associated student body and student store. They do not want us selling unnutritional foods. Sharing tables at elementary schools must be supervised, and food safety guidelines. What sharing table is, say a child is served apple or a carton of milk at lunchtime, but they decide they don't want it, and as they are going out, they'll put it on a table, and some other child or some other adult may take that, and that is not allowed. They do not want us to do that. They want us to discard the food. It sounds wasteful, but they do not want to take the chance of food being spoiled by sitting outside on a table because it's left the oversight of the food and nutrition staff. So that is a new regulation that they are asking us to follow. The technical assistance recommendation, we had 5 of them. And so the first one is they needed a computerized report to match household addresses for direct certification recipients. This would be for the low income, the free and reduced. They wanted computerized so that it's easy to match up because we do get funding based on free and reduced lunch counts. New verification for cost procedures for families with 0 income. So these are all, if sometimes we depend upon income tax reports to verify income. They want us to be more, little bit more relaxed and maybe have question-answer sessions, maybe have interviews with the people instead of just disqualifying them for free and reduced. New accounting job description to support food and nutrition mandates and complexities. This is an area we will be working with the Personnel Commission in our district. Right now we have a job description for just accountant for the food that works in the food and nutrition program. CDE wants a more specific job description which says food and nutrition accountant because of all the regulations that come with that program. They want us to look at increasing food cafeteria fund revenues within the department because they are deficit spending. They are asking us to bring that budget into a positive balance. The last one, follow administrative procedure 6.612 when collecting unpaid meal charges from the parents. At the end of the school year, several of our schools may have balance owed from the students, and it becomes the work of the principal and his staff to collect these monies. Sometimes it's hard to go after. The school, the food and nutrition program cannot have debt when they close the books. So we, Dr. Robertson and I, have worked out a procedure whereby the general fund will pick up some of those expenses.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm still stuck back on the competitive food sales. Vending machines are out too?
Vending machines have been out for a while, but we have, yes.
All right, it's been a while. Okay.
And no Pepsi or Dr. Pepper either.
I knew about that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, switch. Okay, thank you. Any further questions on the information item? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Lalonde. We go to G503, request for qualifications RFQ for underwriters, special tax revenue bond issuances. Ms. Lalonde.
Thank you, Madam President. This item was entered here for information item only. We did do an RFQ based on board direction at the May 18th board meeting. We sent it out and it closed last Friday. And we had 2 applicants who were deemed to be responsive, and that would be Stiefel and Piper Jaffrey. I think there were some questions and concerns from the board on this, so open it up.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to propose that we pull this RFQ to be redone based on the fact that we had only 2 responses, and my belief that the RFQ was too narrowly drawn, specifically that it required only Melrose bond issuances at K-12 schools, and that in the last 5 years a minimum of 10 be done at 5 different K-12 school districts. And so I propose, based on the goal of creating a pool of 3 to 5 underwriters, and certainly there are qualified ones out there: Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, RBC, JP Morgan. That since the goal would be to have 3, we actually only have 1 more than the one we've used for the last 15 years that's enjoyed a sole source contract. So my proposal would be that we redo this process with an RFQ that then is approved by the board before it goes out.
Is that a motion, Ms. Beatty?
Information item only.
Information item.
To not accept this as a first reading.
Just information.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a first reading, and so.
I'll withhold the motion
Okay.
and allow our speakers to speak, and then we'll make that determination. Ms. Burgoyne.
Well, I guess I'm sort of confused because we only can do land secured debt. There's no possibility for us to do any more general obligation bonds unless the board chooses to go out and have another voter election and pass another bond. We only have land secured debt. The RFQ was written by our financial advisor. He took into consideration what this district has done. Over the last 5 years, we have issued 19 different sets of bonds. Of those 19, 15 of them were land secured debt for $440 million. In 2010, we did 3 series. In 2011, we did 2. Of land secured, we did 2 general obligation. In 2012, we did 2. 2013, we did an additional 2. 2014, we did 4, 1 geobond. 2015, we did 3. Unfortunately, as we have told as we have discussed in the financial advisors discussed, that there are a limited amount of qualified underwriters in the state of California that provide services for K-12 land secured debt. And the landscape is shrinking as the larger firms are absorbing smaller agencies. In the past years, there's been a consolidation in this area. Stiefel acquired Stone & Youngberg and De La Rosa. 2 of those were both firms that were very active in land secured market. Prior to that, Piper Jaffray acquired bankers from several firms, including UBS, when we had the financial meltdown, who had specialized in land secured financing. These 2 are the last 2 of the major financings. Land secured financings, again, are unique and require a special skill set and knowledge of a specific segment of the market. In order to get the lowest cost in the borrowing for the district, it's important to work with firms that have a specialized skill set needed to sell land and secured debt. We sent out, in fact, this was done by the financial advisor. I requested him to do it because I knew it was going to be complicated in light of what's going on in the municipal market. He personally went out and sent them out independently.
Which financial advisor?
Fieldman Rolap.
Okay.
He sent them out to the 9 firms that he thought would be interested. They had conversations. I do not have the analysis yet because they have not had time to evaluate them. They're going to do a matrix. We did have a letter from, I got an email today from Raymond James, who I was sort of surprised because they are sort of a contender, but because of our requirement for a minimum of 10 transactions for no less than 5 throughout the date of this request for 5 K-12 educational agencies, they did not qualify. I want to quote what Parker previously worked for Stiefel, and he went to Raymond James, and so he's getting reestablished there. You have a very well-established, very serious land-secured financing program, and you need an experienced team. I was very proud to be a part of your financing team for all of their years. That said, I should give Betsy compliments as well. She works for Stiefel. So again, we have no problem with going out again, but we're probably going to get the same results. Of the 9, most of them do not do land-secured debt, or they do one deal or a very small deal. They'll do a $2 million deal or a $3 million deal. My job has always been to get the best rate for our district. That means you have to have somebody that's very knowledgeable in the field. They have to go out and market these. They are not bonds. Geo bonds are vanilla bonds. Anybody will buy geo bonds. We have very complicated land-secured debt. And I hope by seeing our presentation previously, you're seeing how complicated, because there are different revenue flows. So anybody that does our underwriting has to understand how that financing goes. They have to understand the cash flow. They have to understand the debt. Sometimes there's not just one layer of debt involved. So if you want to have this pulled and redone, I need some direction from the board. I need some specifics because again, Fieldman Rolap does this all the time, and they use it as what the industry standard is.
Oh, I just had a quick question on. Okay, you said Fieldman Rolap wrote the RFQ, but the RFQ was identical to the one that was done before Fieldman Rolap when we had an RFQ for a financial advisor, because we had been using the Delinker Group for several decades.
Fieldman Rolap did this. This is for an underwriter, and it might be the format, but it's probably an industry format.
So the industry format was for the land-based secured debt. Only K-12 unified school districts in the state of California would be considered.
Correct.
With, since 2010, a minimum of 10 transactions from no less than 5 school districts. I mean, it was identical language between the financial advisor and the underwriter's RFQ.
Well, the California K-12 is a requirement. That's what we do. And again, I can talk to Adam. Adam is the one that put this together, and he put in the minimum 10 transactions for 5 K-12. So you're asking for 5 transactions from a underwriter that has worked with 5 separate agencies.
10
Fi-
transactions,
10,
5
10
K-12s.
transactions for no less than 5. So that means they have to have had 5 school districts that they worked with. And of those 5 school districts, they had to have a total of 10 transactions. And those transactions could not total less than $50 million over 5 years.
And why K-12 as opposed to, say, high school district?
Because Poway is a K-12 school district, and they do it would be elementary, middle, it means K-12.
Right.
It means,
Well, I'm saying, what if the underwriter had 3 K-12s and 2 high school districts? Why not?
that's K-12. They could do elementary district or high school district. It's a K-12. It's inclusive. It doesn't
Okay.
have to be
It
just
reads
a K-12.
like a
No, it's-
unified.
No.
So you're saying so it could
Sure,
be
Del Mar, if they
elementary
did-
district.
Sure. If they did work for Del Mar, they could put Del Mar in it because it's a K-12 school district.
Did you go ahead?
The county treasurer tax collector said in their letter to us from several months ago that we should conduct this RFP for underwriting services, quote, to ascertain the competitive landscape of banking services for our next financing. So what you're saying is that this RFQ, this request, tells us that there is not much of a competitive landscape out there because there aren't that many qualified firms. Do I have that right?
For somebody that's been working in the industry for 15 years, I would say yes. I think if all the consultants, like you called them up here, and I will ask for the attorney's opinion also.
Sure. Ms. Burgoyne listed in the staff report the underwriters that the RFP or request for qualification was sent to. There are a number of firms here that I don't recognize as actually doing community facilities district work. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess if you're Stiefel, they acquired 2 of their top competitors in the land secured business over the last couple of years. So they unfortunately aren't there to be able to compete with them. So I don't know why the others wouldn't have submitted unless they felt that they just didn't have the qualifications that were requested.
May I add something, Ms. Beatty?
Yes, please.
The city of Poway just did an RFQ for underwriters, and they reached out to over 9 underwriters that they thought would be interested in applying, and they did the evaluation process using their financial advisor, who is KNN, and the person that they selected as their lead underwriter is Stiefel. And they just felt that they had with the experience working with large deals and the experience in the field, Stiefel was head above the rest.
One of the things that I could recommend, and we could go out, again, we don't want to go out and pretend like we're soliciting, because that might not look good from the board's perspective, on the board. There are school districts that, and I believe Stiefel, they do senior manager and co-manager. Now, you wouldn't do that for a small deal, but for a substantial deal for $40 or $50 million, then you could have a senior manager and a co-manager. That's done. Unfortunately, the industry, I put a packet on all of your desks, and I didn't have a chance to tell you about it last month on the financial market. And that first, it was a blue binder. It was just like a blue portfolio. And if you look at the first 2 pages, you will see all of the mandatory requirements that are being put on financial industries. So there are a lot of these agencies and companies that are now being absorbed by the bigger ones because they don't have the revenue or the resources to keep up with the federal requirements and the state requirements. We used Stone & Youngberg for years. They were absorbed by Stiefel. And now they just acquired another firm, but that firm does not do land secured debt. And Piper Jaffray's doing the same thing.
It's just, I mean, a state of 38 million, it's just hard to imagine we couldn't come up with 3, at least, or, only one other than Stiefel. And as I said, Citigroup, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, I mean, these are huge. And so I guess what I'm proposing is that if we broaden the scope so that it's not, 5 different districts, 10 different issuances in the last 5 years. It may be sufficient to have had 2 different, 10 issuances for 20 from 2 school districts, or 8 from 5, or whatever construct. I mean, it would be nice to have an actual pool, and a pool isn't, it's ironic, the result, it was the exact same criteria as that for the financial advisor, with the exact same result. We got the financial advisor we'd been using for the previous 20 years plus 1 other, and that's exactly what happened here.
Well, I looked up, Malaga sent me the RFQ for the city of Poway, and the city of Poway's, first of all, those were taxable bonds. They're successor agency tax increment bonds, so they have nothing to do with land secured debt. Their requirement was to go back to 2012, and they had to provide information. Warren helped me with the act that was implemented, but they had to have specific qualifications, since there was it has to do with the RDA. So they had to come up with their ability to show their expertise. My concern has always been, we have a very complicated Mello-Roos funding program that has generated, we have been very successful, but as you've seen tonight, there are layers, and you cannot just have somebody come in and go out and sell just straight land secured debt. They have to know our district. They have to be able to market that. They have to be able to sell what's going on in our district. As you have heard from people in the audience, they refer to our land secured debt as junk bonds. They are not junk bonds. They are very successful in the market. Just because they're a triple B, it's because their value to lien is not 100 to 1. So we have to have someone as a consultant that can explain that to the institutional buyers and the retail buyers. So if we bring somebody in that only has 1 year of experience, I have a concern what they will be able to get for us in the market. That is just something, and again, this is an information item only. We don't have to do anything with it. I'm not going to be selling bonds here for a while, so it's something that you all can talk about, and maybe give Malaga and I some input as to some other suggestions. We did this because it was asked to be done, and I sort of knew what was going to happen, because the market's just closing down. It's just closing down in a lot of different areas. It's closing down in the construction area also, because there are so many jobs out there that all the contractors that we used to be able to rely on for projects are being able to pick and choose, and the construction costs are going up. So just let Malaga and I know.
Okay.
The board, this is an information item, so if the board would like to give direction to staff to redo this work, we're here to take your direction.
Any other comments or suggestions?
Well, I agree with President Beatty in that we do need a pool. I think you should have a pool for all these things. 2 doesn't constitute a pool. He's indicated that we had 1 firm, Raymond James, that was very close to qualification, didn't quite make it. So maybe that's our threshold, what it takes to get us 3. But that's separate and distinct from another consideration I have, which is that obviously the district's job is to get the best service at the lowest price. That's the same obligation that a private company has to their shareholders. The difference is that the private company doesn't have to make any justification for who or why they use them, as long as they can respond to their shareholders. Public agencies have a slightly different obligation, in the sense, in addition to getting the best price and the best service, we do have something of a moral obligation to rotate the services being provided by private sector companies to the government. And so to the extent that you have companies that are equally qualified, there is a certain school of thought that says they should rotate those opportunities to provide services to the public sector. And unfortunately, we don't do that. Now, even now, we've said that there are two firms that are qualified to provide this work. But as you say, we're not going out again very soon. But what would you say to saying, okay, fine, we have 2 firms. Let's rotate the offerings between Piper Jaffray and Stiefel, and see if they're capable of doing that.
That would be an option, and I think that would be a good option. We have used Piper Jaffray in the past, years ago. I look at it very selfishly. There's only 3 people in my department. When I do a deal, I am dealing with at least 15 consultants. I have discussed this with Malaga ad nauseum because I feel it's punitive to me, because it's like asking me to swap out my department annually. So I only have 3 employees. I don't have I used to have 7. I have to rely on outside resources. So every time I'm asked to swap out those people, it's like me going out and rehiring employees.
Yeah.
So one thing our district has been renowned for is continuity and stability and of employees. I'm been here 900 years. So I have no problem with Piper and Stiefel. I think they're the best in the industry. I know both of them. And as I said, Piper did jobs for us earlier, back in the early 2000s. So, and the other alternative would be when you go to do a big deal to look as a co-manager.
And rest assured, I view your time and energy as just as much a public resource as the dollars we pay to the outside consultants. And I don't want to waste that any more than I waste a dollar on anything else. And so I think that certainly merits consideration in the conversation. It's not an overriding consideration, but no individual thing is an overriding consideration to me. So, but I think that's as valid as any other point.
And again, we are not required to go out for an RFP for financial consultants. So.
Yeah. Not legally, right. No.
So I would like to just point out that this is the recommendation. If the board would like to make a different recommendation to staff to go back with a different criteria, the staff will do that. But as you just pointed out, there's a difference between the legal and the moral. That's your interpretation of your role, that it's a moral obligation to give all these firms work, or different firms chances to work. I tend to agree with Ms. Burgoyne that our job is to do the first set of criteria you set for the school board, for our kids, is to get the best work done for the most competitive price. And the quality of the work is important. And switching consultants when not necessary, unless you feel there's a reason that consultant is not giving you good value for what the work is, especially as you've seen how complicated the 15 CFDs are that we do and how complicated those sales must be, I have to support the recommendation that we stick with the RFP that we put out. So that's my 2 cents. When
you mentioned the senior program, senior manager, junior manager, or how would that manifest? Are you saying then you'd go out for additional?
You would identify who's your senior and who's your junior on a
beyond
deal.
Piper and Stiefel, you'd identify other qualified underwriters?
You could do that because we are not required to go out for an RFP for underwriters for financial.
That could, if the issue is they need some training wheels, so to speak.
Ms. Beatty, when the city of Poway did their RFP, they have named Stiefel as the lead underwriter, but then they have Citi and Morgan Stanley as co-underwriters to call upon them, and like you said, to train them to come along.
And I'm going to guess that those training wheels underwriters cost additional money. They make it more expensive.
Yeah, you would have to pay. Would. Yes. And the city deals are, I think, a couple $100 million.
Well, I thought that the senior junior manager program is not. I mean, they share the wealth, was my understanding. I had a conversation actually with the county treasurer's office about
it. Wouldn't be additional, but it would be. There might be some additional costs.
Andy, Sandy, in your professional opinion, it seems to me would be a moot point if we don't have any bonds to put out in the near future.
Well, and that's what I was saying is that we do have one coming up. I believe the developer over in Black Mountain Ranch is going to be giving the board a letter requesting his improvement areas be sold before the end of the year, which is going to be about $10 million. So it's a small deal.
So you think that's the last for 2015?
Yeah,
or
I hope
or-
it is. Not that I don't like my job.
So, and because the county treasurer's office also mentioned, I mean, they had 19 firms that they had sent out because they do this every few years, their pool of underwriters, and so
They do, however, the county doesn't issue land secured debt.
So you're saying that's a smaller pool because it's a
Yes,
different
that
creature.
would probably be for either their general obligation debt or
Right.
their lease revenue bond
Right.
debt.
But you're saying it's just a broader pool of underwriters to choose from.
We had been
qualified
going out for
applicants.
geo bonds, we would have probably gotten 25 RFQs.
Okay, so it sounds like we have time to revisit this, so we put it on hold. I like and I guess we'll just keep in mind the
I can get some more
Being
information
senior-
for you all about the senior manager, co-manager.
yeah, because maybe that's the way to help to solve a fair compromise, so to speak. So, all right, thank you. Thanks.
Ms. Beatty, if I
Oh,
could just
yes,
add as one
Mr.
simple
Zane.
observation, I appreciate the staff setting high criteria for qualifications. I don't see anything wrong with that. If I could use an analogy of lowering standards that we have more passing students, I'd rather keep our standards high and have fewer passing students. So I appreciate the process. I understand the need as Board Member Sellers articulated, but I'm not a proponent of lowering the standards or criteria for this particular service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments for G503? Is that where, any further comments? Okay, seeing none, we are at new board business. Is there any new business from board members? Okay, I will just interject that I forgot to mention, to give an update on Mr. Rings, the man from Midland whose yard was having balls come into his yard. Anyway, so he has, the construction has begun, and a fence, basically a chain link fence, is being extended, and it's got a arc. Anyway, I just want to thank Mike Tarantino, who's out in the audience. I just want to thank Mike for all his help in working with Mr. Rings, and if you wanted to share anything about that project. I'd forgotten to mention that during my board report. So no pressure here, Mike.
I think one of the things that I'd like to have you share is that this solution was offered to this gentleman several years ago, and he didn't want it.
And that was basically all I was going to share. This is not a new solution.
Right.
It's an old solution, however, brought forward by Mr. Rings. So I think Mrs. Beatty and I gave him the opportunity to put forth his ideas rather than the district's, and the district accept those ideas. However, it was nothing new. But it's under construction. We're going from there, and hopefully I have to be careful how I word this, that we correct the problem of the balls flying into his yard.
Yeah, and I think it had everything to do with the human touch as well. And we met out at Midland, and you had told him to call you anytime, and apologize if there were any misunderstandings in the past. And so I think that all that meant a lot. And anyway, I just thank you and Ms. Salandi for helping to make this happen.
You're welcome.
Yes, Mr. Sellers.
I do have one comment. As part of the consent agenda tonight, we approved the Budget Review Advisory Committee. First thing I want to clarify is that it's the BRAC, not the BRAC. The BRAC is the Base Review Realignment Commission, and that has mixed reviews here in San Diego. But the BRAC is now up and standing, and so get those applications in. I trust staff to get that app on the website in a reasonable amount of time. So let's get those cards and letters flowing. I'd like to appoint some people to the BRAC at the August meeting. Thank you.
Any further new business from the board? Seeing none, the next regularly scheduled board meeting is Monday, August 24th. Is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Okay, motion by Board Member Sellers. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you. You know,